treated? Do they have access by the Red Cross, Amnesty International, and other international organizations there? Let me introduce our soldiers to you first. And by the way, first, the format of this press conference is this. This is a Zoom press conference, and there are about 100 mass media registered here. Most likely, we will not be able to fit all of you in terms of questions, but let me remind you that our speakers today are heavily wounded soldiers, so probably it will be an event up to an hour. Let me introduce Wikipedia, the soldier who was imprisoned by the occupiers, was heavily wounded, lost leg. Vladislav, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot. My code name is Wikipedia. I performed military assignments from the beginning of the full-fledged invasion until the night when the decision was taken to evacuate from the steelworks. I've been heavily wounded, was in a very difficult state in the night before the evacuation. For 6 weeks I was staying in Donetsk in hospital number 15. Vyacheslav, can you tell us how the Russians are treating prisoners of war? What instruments of pressure and coercion do they use, and whether they have used it against you? Well, the Russians are using all the tools to coerce the prisoners. It's important to understand that Russia does not look for the truth. They already know what the truth is in their mind's eye, and then they try to tie it with the facts that might serve as evidence to their truth. So Russian needed some evidence that they were cheating us, but they were not properly curing us. They just wanted us to stay alive until the moment when we might be exchanged. And in our case, we were lucky to be exchanged. So in terms of the pressure and coercion, first of all, it was a psychological pressure, a very tough psychological pressure, because we were not allowed any means of communication with our relatives, with the outside world, and they tried to explain the psychological pressure by claiming that nobody needs you, you are losing this war. You have nobody to call to, and you don't need to call anyone. But that's already a violation of international conventions. Just imagine that when heavily wounded are staying in the hospital, but from day one they start psychological pressure, interrogations. In my personal case, the interrogation started even before they started giving me antibiotics after the amputation of my left leg. So it's not treatment, medical treatment at all. Other soldiers were exposed to tortures with needles inserted into the wounds, not offering water or not offering access to sufficient medicines, or not even giving ability to undergo needed medical treatment procedures. But the Russians claimed that it's a full-fledged medical treatment, and so, but we were not treated properly because no special medical doctors would come to us. They would not bring us the needed medicines, and the same is true in terms of surgical procedures. So when they didn't want to treat some of the soldiers, they just kept them back in the hospital after we were exchanged, and I don't know their fate now. Well, as to the tortures that you just mentioned, was it happening during interrogations and so-called investigative measures, or during treatments as well? during all this time, we were exposed to uncomfortable conditions, and they were uncomfortable even for healthy people, let alone for heavily wounded soldiers, because everyone in that hospital was heavily wounded. Some of the soldiers were kept not in this hospital number 15, but in Yelenivka, in the prison for prisoners uh, of war, and one can only imagine what sort of torture the healthy brothers in arms were exposed to. And I can judge it from the videos, how hard it is for them and how inhuman the conditions are. Thank you, Vladislav. Now the floor goes to Denis Chiporko, codename Manga, also Azov regiment. He lost his hand, was heavily wounded, was imprisoned. So, Denis, can you share with us what you witnessed and what were the conditions of your imprisonment, and what are the state of your brothers that are still there? I am Denis, defender of Mariupol from February the 24th. I was wounded on May the 11th, lost my hand, and got a wound in my leg, and I was a prisoner of Olenivka prison. Well, this Olenivka prison, have you heard or witnessed when some of the prisoners of war were taken out or tortured or exposed to uh, extortion? Well, I've been a witness of our soldiers being beaten up. They will take off our clothes, force us to sit down. We cannot lift our hand or head. They will be beating on you if you try to lift your head. I was beaten being asked to sign some evidence. What sort of evidence? Well, the evidence against our commanders, claiming that allegedly we bombed the city, that they wanted us to take the blame for all the crimes that they perpetrated. So, and what did you say? I said that I would not sign this, and they would start beating on me with sticks. They would always threaten me with execution. I've seen some of the boys taken from our barrack for 2 or 3 days. Then they would be broken bones, broken ribs, when they would be brought back in 2 or 3 days. Sometimes they will not give us access to drinking water for 2 to 3 days, and then give us access to technical water. Also, a limitation on food supplies, so Russians were not meeting the Geneva Convention conditions. We were all sleeping on the floor in the 1 square meter space per soldier. Dennis, Red Cross or any other international organizations have they been observing your stay there? Well, when I was brought to Olenivka prison, there was no Red Cross people allowed there. We were told that their car was outside the walls, but they were not allowed into the colony. Dmitro Vasichenko, code name Vishnya, who serves in the military intelligence. What have you witnessed, and what do you know about the conditions of stay? Hello, I am Dmitro Lysichenko. My code name is Vishnya. I flew. Well, Dmitro was dropped from a helicopter on the 28th of March. So he was one of those volunteers to be flown into the already encircled city. At that time, Mariupol city has been heavily ruined. You could not recognize the city. So Dmitro agreed to fly in on the helicopter, risking being dropped down by the Russian air defense. So how long did you stay in Mariupol? Until the end? until we moved to Azovstal. That's where I was wounded twice. So you you became a prisoner. So what were the instruments of pressure and that you were exposed to? Well, they were threatening me with murder during so-called investigative measures. Yes. What did they want from you? Well, they wanted us to claim that we were killing civilians and non-combatants. Of course, we didn't do that, and that's why we never uh, signed those evidence statements. Thank you, friends. Let me once again remind you that our heroes are heavily wounded and are undergoing medical treatment and rehabilitation right now. So, friends, your questions, we will see your hands raised in Zoom conference. Go ahead. Hello? Hello, Simon? Can you hear me? Simon Schuster? From Time magazine, a weekly magazine. If it's okay with you, I would ask a question in Russian. My Ukrainian is still raw. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for this press conference today. I would like to ask the following. President Zelensky, in his interview, said that he talked to the commanders and soldiers of Azov regiment and other defenders of Azovstal during all the time of defense. So, are you aware of those calls? Have you heard anything from either the president or Zaluzhny or Arahami? Was there any direct contact with your commanders? And how do you assess their attempts to help you both during the defense of Azovstal and when you were imprisoned? Thank you, Simon. And let me tell you that not all of our soldiers had direct contact even with the commanders like Redis and others. So, Vladislav, let's start with you. Well, let me share what I remember. We did receive information that senior commanders, top brass, were on direct contact with Mariupol defenders and that they attempted to deblock the city and provide us with any assistance that they could. Uh, we heard a lot. We heard about the attempts of special operations forces of Ukraine to bring some medicines and ammunition to us, which was extremely important for us to recognize that we are not alone. But unfortunately, this assistance proved not to be enough. But what's important to recognize that Mariupol was the city that was important for the enemy, so they brought so many air defense means that Bayraktar and other UAVs would not be able to fly all the way into the city, and thus we had to continue the defense with whatever ammunition we had left. So the question was, how do you evaluate the attempts of President Zelensky and of the authorities in in respect of their attempts to liberate you during the defense and after you were imprisoned? Well, when I was there, I was evaluating those efforts as positive. But now, when I learned how much they tried, I believe that they did everything they could to save us. Friends, your next question, please. But please introduce yourself. We can see you. Irina Prutkova, Mariupol. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the defenders of Mariupol. And my question is, what personal assistance do you need or your families? Dennis, could you respond to that? That's the question to all of the participants. For the time being, it's the Azov regiment that provides us with the assistance, so you can ask them. Well, Azov regiment has so-called medical support and rehabilitation service, which provides assistance not only to the soldiers but to the next of kin, direct family members. So Olena Tolkacheva in Facebook and Telegram, or Angels of Azov, she is dealing with this professionally for 8 years to both soldiers and their families. We can see you. Please introduce. Yeah, hello. My name is Vladislav Masyuk. I worked for Current Time Media. First of all, I would like to thank the guys present here, and that's coming from me as a Ukrainian, but as a producer of the media, my question might sound weird to you. It's not about you staying there, but about the attempt to kill Daria Dugina, the daughter of the Russian propagandist Dugin. The Russian FSB stated that the perpetrators of this attempt is a serviceman from Azov regiment, namely Natalia Pavlovna Shaban. Do you know that lady, Natalia Shaban? Her maiden name was Volk, and she might have a daughter of 11 years of age. So, being in Mariupol, being Azovstal, have you come across this person? Because there is an FSB statement, and there is a Russian site similar to Mirotvorets, Peacemaker, where they collect data about our military, and there is information about Natalia Shaban, born 1979, who, as they claim, was a soldier of Azov regiment. Can you comment on this? Thank you, Vladislav. I'll try to handle this question. Yeah, I also read this news like 30 minutes ago, and it sounded ridiculous to me, actually. Why ridiculous and laughable? Because FSB is not earning their pay, because this fake looks so funny. Why fake? Well, first of all, no, I don't know this person, this lady personally. Secondly, the documents that they showed, I mean the enemy and the enemy's media, they show the documents of a person who is not a serviceman from Azov regiment. Let me explain why. Because our uniform is multicam, multi-camouflaged, so all our pictures, all our ID pictures have the same uniform, while this lady wears the parade ground uniform of the National Guards, and even the ID says that 3057 National Guards unit, and Azov regiment is part of that union. But not everyone who serves in 3057 are Azov regiment soldiers. Thus, this lady is not a soldier of Azov regiment. Another funny fact, how would the enemy have this information, those documents? At all. Yesterday, at one of the Russian channels, I have found ID, my own ID, the bank credit card that the enemy found, my credit card, and now they claim that this is the document belonging to a soldier who was killed, but I'm alive. And also in the public websites, you can still see my name as killed in action, but which is not true. Back to this lady, you can see that it's written there that her ID was changed when she got married. So what was shown was an old ID that was probably found in the archives of military unit 3057, and the enemy might have found it, and now they claim very similar to business card of Yarash. So it's a fake, and all the facts that they claim are true are actually bogus. Most likely, the commanders of Azov regiment will make a separate statement on this. But guys, are you even aware of a colonel lady in Azov regiment? No, no. Are there a lot of ladies serving Azov regiment, especially like they claim who is the sharpshooter? I personally don't know a single female soldier of Azov regiment who would be directly involved in combat. Neither sharpshooter nor the heavy machine gunner. Yeah, in our regiment we do have female soldiers, but working as in the administration of our regiment and the headquarters. On the front lines, there were only male soldiers with proper military professional skills. So whoever claims you that there are female soldiers who were fighting with small arms, that's a fake. Well, thank you for this response. There are no female soldiers of Azov regiment who would be directly fighting with small arms. Next question, please. We can see you, please. Introduce yourself. Can you hear me? Yeah. Olega Rybinska, 5th channel. I would like to wish fast recovery for our boys. Thank you for your service. My question is this. Here in peaceful regions of Ukraine, we all feel guilt that we are not doing enough to help Azov regiment soldiers, and but people want to help the soldiers so that the whole world will know and take care of those Azov soldiers who are still imprisoned. Well, now that you came back from the Russian imprisonment, have you seen yourself how much Ukrainians are doing to liberate other brothers in arms from Azov regiment? So, can you feel the support of Ukraine to your regiment, and please advise us what can we do more so that the whole world will not forget about you and the war in Ukraine? So there's lots of information noise around the Azovstal defenders. So is it good? Does it help all this media outcry? Well, right now, what I can care about is what happens with our brothers in arms in Olenivka prison. They were evacuated from Azovstal, but the enemy doesn't meet their word, which is what we expect from our enemy, because the Russians always um, fail to walk the talk, and that's what they do for hundreds of years now. But that doesn't make the life easier for me because my personal friends are still in Alenivka. Lots of my personal friends were killed during the terrorist act in Alenivka. Uh, we hear so much information from the Russians, but that's all fake information. And this example from today of this so-called colonel lady who is supposed to be involved in the attempt on Dugina's daughter, then lots of uh, fakes about HIMARS, rocket systems, but we want the world to know that Russia does not follow on its previously reached agreements. Russia violates the norms of the international conventions, and that's what concerns us because it makes me afraid for the fate of the soldiers who are still imprisoned by Russians. Well, what the journalists try to say is that all the information about you, did it help you or not when you were imprisoned? Well, we heard nothing there. All the Russians told us is that nobody needs you, they forgot about you, your commanders, your politicians, they forgot about you, we are not you are not needed to them. But now I can feel myself that that's not true, and of course all this information outro is important and is needed. Dmitro, Denis, have you heard about all this information in the Ukrainian media? No, I heard nothing. We were like in a vacuum. We only heard their side and what the enemy was telling us. Your country doesn't need you, your president doesn't need you, your commanders don't need you. When you come back, they will kill you. But somebody mentioned something, and that's why we will not release you. No, they just told us that it's Ukraine that is not meeting the previously reached agreements, that you are not needed. It's the Ukrainian side that doesn't want to exchange you. That's they always were trying to find the reason to not make the prisoner swap, and they were always blaming others. So of course they were trying to find scapegoats. They are saints, and everybody else is to be blamed. Dennis, what about you? Have they told you when you were in prison that Zelensky said something, and that's why you will have to repay for this, or that the Ukrainian mass media says something and that you will suffer for that? No, they haven't shared any information. They told us they've already captured Zaporozhye, now they captured Kharkiv, that they again close to Kiev, that they don't, that Ukraine doesn't need us, that even if we release you, it's the Ukrainian side that will shoot you down. They also always claim that they almost occupy the whole of Ukraine. Have you ever believed them? No, never. There is brief delay. I have another question to this soldier with the code name Vishnya. If you are asked to share evidence, an eyewitness account in the Hague military tribunal, what would you share? What happened in Alenivka, of course. What they did there, how they destroyed and killed off my brothers in arms. What exactly would you share about this incident? The whole world observed that it was no attack by HIMARS. These were not our bombs. That was the doing of the enemy. And it violates Geneva Convention. These are the crimes of humanity. What's your version of the events? That was a terrorist act perpetrated by the Russian enemy against military prisoners, prisoners of war, people without weapons, people staying behind bars. They were tortured. I don't know whether they were alive when this terrorist act was perpetrated by the country that is a terrorist country. Good afternoon. Dmitro Sitnenko, TSN. Well, first of all, great thanks from all of us. And my question is this. What's wrong with the Russians? Why do they behave like that? And let me clarify my question. Once my grandmother told me that during the occupation of Kiev during World War II, Nazis were 50% of them adequate soldiers and 50% sadists. So what's your take on those Russians that you were dealing with? Are they still human or are they animals? Are there any good Russians? Probably there are. I'm not aware of them. But have you come across those that treated you better than others? Or they're filled with hatred? Yeah, but you never know whether they are bluffing or whether they're sincere. We will never trust them ever again. Dennis, have you come across good or bad, or how could you evaluate the treatment of Ukrainians? No, there are no good Russians. They would. When I was interrogated by FSB officers, the first interrogation was calm. They were interviewing me. They even gave me 2 cigarettes to smoke. But then they started threatening me when they learned that I was serving in the tank unit. Well, they started moral tortures. Vladislav, my take on this is this. Well, let me and respond by asking a question from you. Why would you assume that I could come across good Russians? How could they possibly be guarding me there or interrogating me? Good Russians will not get there, but I can tell you where can you find normal, adequate Russians. They are citizens of the Russian Federation. They are civilized, educated people who, even before the full-fledged invasion, left the Russian Federation, and all of them are helping us with, yeah, that's a humanitarian assistance mostly, but they have made their choice, not because they love Ukraine, but because they want to be on the side of civilization and humanity. So they are not like the predominant majority of the Russians, which is let's keep supporting Russian troops because they're our troops. But normal, adequate Russians, yeah, they are abroad from Russia, and I don't even treat normal or adequate those Russians who are still staying at the territory of the Russian Federation and keeping mum, being silent. Yeah, I know that they're afraid, but because of their fear, they help the aggressor country, the country that is clearly a terrorist country. Your next question, please. Good afternoon, Rostislav Verchuk, on behalf of the Spanish publication EFE. What was the morale of your brothers in arms that you could communicate with during imprisonment, even despite all the tortures and inhumane treatment? Have they trained you to withstand such interrogations, and did it work, this training? Vladislav, let's start with you this time. Well, I'll start answering from the end. Whether we were exposed to any sort of training in Azov regiment and whether it worked for us. Well, we were blamed during the interrogations, namely, oh, you are from Azov regiment, which means that you pray to wooden pagan gods. Yeah, we have some boys like that on our regiment, but not all of us, of course. Also, they would keep asking us about our political beliefs. But what helped us tremendously was that we are all well aware what we are facing. We are professional soldiers. We know what to expect. It was not the war of our choosing, but now we need to do what needs to be done. They attacked us, and we need to defend us. That's all. Well, as a tank soldier, have you been trained to withstand interrogations? No, no such training. Only military training that was offered to us, but we're unbreakable because we're Ukrainians. We've been praying and believing until the very last, and we still believe that all the imprisoned Azov regiment soldiers will be liberated. Dmitro, what about you? Have you been ready, a person who has been dropped from the helicopter into the already encircled Mariupol? Of course I was ready for it. I love my motherland. I love Ukraine. All of us love it. We would gladly give our lives for our country and for our people. I would like to clarify the statements. Well, the response to whether they are ready to give their eyewitness accounts in The Hague or at any other international war crime tribunal. Of course, they are ready for this, both in terms of how the prisoners were treated as well as what the Russian troops perpetrated in the city of Mariupol from February the 24th until late May, while they still stayed there. All their statements have been documented already and will be used in any legal proceedings. But Azov regiment soldiers, they are not complaining. Of course, they've been properly vetted and selected even before becoming a soldier of Azov regiments. So all of their statements have been documented because all of them were exposed to tortures and inhumane treatment. Please introduce yourself. We can see you. You're on. Go ahead. You can speak now.
Question. How do you know that Alexander Dugin's daughter has been really killed in a car? There is no proof, no photo. It could be anybody in the car. Any dead body could have been put in the car. It could be completely fake. This is my question.
Well, let me respond like this. I can believe now that Russians are faking everything. And you're right, it might very well be that she's still alive, or she might have been killed by some guerrilla freedom fighters inside Russia. But I cannot understand now what was the reason for that terrorist act. it does look and sound like a fake. Probably the Russian politicians were not feeling comfortable because of what she was stating, and thus she was destroyed by them. But now they try to present this as allegedly something perpetrated by Azov regiment. But like I said at the very beginning, this is their version, the version that they published as official. It could not be treated as a true one. It's all fake. Since they've already lied, it could very well be that she's still alive. But it's tough to say for us. Could it be some media preparation for this mock trial that they plan to carry out in a couple of days? Could be. I don't know. I just heard about this recently. I don't know. Dennis, what about you? Have you been aware about Daria Dugina, her father in Azov regiment? No, I don't know her personally, and I believe this is provocation against Ukraine, trying to allege that Ukraine did it. Well, let me add to this. Azov regiment is a military unit. We are not involved in the politics. Our job is to fight at the battlefield. This accident with Dugin's daughter looks like an event that happened to impact the Russian population. I didn't know about her until she allegedly died, but in Russia they play on the emotions of ordinary people. They try to bring compassion, claiming, well, look, this is a daughter of a politician or somebody, of philosopher, yes, some thinker, or well, definitely a propaganda philosopher, but still it most likely they use this information in preparation to this mock trial against our defenders in Mariupol. It smells like a fake, but on the other hand, she might have been murdered. How would I know? But what I want to state is that neither myself nor my friends knew about this lady, but now they present it as if we planned it, we were dreaming about killing her. Well, I don't care what happens with her or with her father. What I do care about is what would happen with the armed Russian soldiers who killed tens of thousands of Mariupol residents, and that's what I've seen myself with my eyes. I do care about what happens with those who killed and raped people in Bucha and Irpin, the civilians, the non-combatants. So I don't care about daughter of Dugin. Thank you. Thanks a lot, friends. Your next question, please. Antin Barkovsky, Espresso Channel. What were the goals of the enemy to kill the imprisoned soldiers in Alenivka? And also, follow-up question, do you believe that this murder of Dugin's daughter, is it the information the way to prepare the audience for this so-called trial in Mariupol, which might happen in a couple of days' time in Mariupol? Dmitro, let's start with you. Olenivka, why did they do this? I believe they wanted to hide the signs of tortures. So they just tortured to death a number of soldiers and then they had to destroy their corpses. What about Dugina's daughter? Will this be used to carry out this illegitimate mock trial that the enemy wants to carry out in Mariupol. I don't know. First of all, I have no clue what this lady, who she is, and I would like to echo with my friend Wikipedia. I don't care about her. What I care are the lives of thousands of residents of Mariupol who were killed by the Russian uh, soldiers. So, Denis, the same two questions to you. The tragedy is Elenivka was definitely the attempt to hide the signs of the beatings, of the tortures, so that nobody would know this, and blame Ukraine, claiming that we that Ukraine destroyed this one barrack with HIMARS. I believe they are just trying to hide the signs of their crimes. As to Dugina's daughter, again, I don't know who she is, and I don't know what they would use it for. Well, let me try and respond at length to your question. I'm convinced that even if they try to carry out so-called tribunal and they want to present it as a real-life tribunal, of course they will be using anything and everything. And back to what I said, Russia doesn't look for truth. Russia doesn't need to get any additional evidence because Russia, all it wants to present is the narrative that it has prepared long before it all happened. Look at what happens in the Russian courts of law. Their courts acquit less than 2% of those who are charged. And I'm talking not about war crime courts, I'm talking about ordinary civilian courts. So for Russia as the country, court hearing is always a show to blame a person and to prove that the person is guilty. Court trials are not about trying to find the truth. It's about presenting whatever evidence, including fakes that Russians have accumulated. And the goal for Russia is to blame our soldiers as a guilty party. That's why they will be coming up with some witness accounts, with some international observers. But who would be those witnesses? These would be unknown people who would be recorded, and Russia will claim that they were eyewitnesses. Also, there will be citizens of other countries who would be observing all that. So thus Russia would claim that this is an international trial. North Korea, Syria, Belarus, doesn't matter where they would come from, but on the other hand they will claim that this is an international trial. Also they will be using, well, any other facts like this alleged killing of Dugina's daughter. And it's not surprising that they already mentioned Azov regiment, and I wouldn't be surprised if they would be now beating and torturing some of my friends who are still imprisoned there, and they will sign statements that they know this lady with the name of Volk, or they will be going through motions trying to present this whole trial as a legitimate process, but they already have the sentence written down. All they need to do now is voice out good for nothing evidence, and that's what we will all observe. They would never have direct evidence. They would always use something that could not be double checked, but Russians will be treating it as a fact. So Russia will be using all available means to present the Ukrainian defenders as criminals. So, responding to any potential questions from you, yes, it's true, Russia will be using whatever they can. Daughters of Dugin, Mariupol residents killed with bare hands by Azovstal defenders, not only Azov regiment soldiers. But we all know that the shelling was perpetrated by enemies, tanks, artillery pieces and planes. Dozens of thousands of Mariupol residents were murdered. And I know for this for a fact, we didn't have so much ammunition to perpetrate so much ruins in Mariupol, which we now can observe on the footage. But they will try to present this as something that the defenders of Azovstal perpetrated. We are running out of time. Some of our soldiers will need to take additional painkillers. So, time for the last couple of questions. We can see the picture, we cannot. Espresso channel, Christina Yatsky. Did Russians treat Azov regiment soldiers differently from other defenders of Azovstal? And the second question, human rights international organizations, have you contacted you to collect evidence as to how Russians are violating Geneva Convention of treating prisoners of war? Dmitro, let's start with you now. Have the international human rights organizations contact you? No, all I am aware of is that Red Cross came to Novazovsk. I've seen their flags, that's all. Is there different treatment to Azov regiment soldiers or to other defenders, paratroopers or national guards officers, security service Ukraine officers? Well, I've been in Donetsk hospital number 15, so I haven't observed it there. Denis, what about you? Yeah, there was a difference in treatment. As soon as they hear that you're from Azov regiment, especially that you were fighting in a tank, then they will interrogate you more, trying to use this for propaganda reasons. Even when they would interrogate National Guards officers or paratroopers, they would ask them, have you witnessed that Azov regiment soldiers were blowing up civilian houses? No, they only responded that we were helping the civilians, handing out water and food to them. Vladislav? Yeah, the treatment was different depending on whether you were a soldier of any other services and units but Azov regiment. They were acutely interested in Azov regiment soldiers. They would spend more time interrogating us, asking more questions about our commanders, probably because they try to depict us as criminals. Well, of course, painting this picture in the mind's eye of their own population. Also, they would ask us provocative questions like, well, the question was not like, have you seen who shot the civilians? The question would be, why did you shoot the civilians? So the way they formulate the question does not allow me to respond that it was not me. They are asking straight away, why did you do this? And my response to you would be, our job was to defend the city. And even when we were encircled at Azovstal steelworks, we were still taking care of the civilians who were staying there. And let me reiterate once again, it was tough for me to lose some of my brothers in arms, but what's even worse, the deaths of dozens and hundreds of thousands of civilians all across Ukraine, not only in Mariupol, from the hands of the enemy. The enemy that tries now to blame us on those deaths of the civilians. So I'm 100% confident that they would be trying to make the same allegations at this mock trial. Well, all those evidence and statements, have they been documented by the international human rights organizations like Red Cross or Amnesty International? No. Not a single international organization interviewed me. The only authority that collected information about the conditions of treatment of the prisoners of war, that was the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU. They were the ones who were gathering such evidence from us. And I would like to echo what my brothers in arms said. I haven't seen a single Red Cross or Amnesty International people in Alenivka or in the places where we were imprisoned. But they might have come there in the first couple of days when I was still unconscious. But no, we are in information vacuum now. We are of no interest to them for some reason. When we were evacuated on the 17th, Red Cross people would stop into our bus, hand out leaflets, and they would ask us, whom do you want us to learn that you are still alive? Military command or relatives. So what did they ask you? They asked us, what's your name, date of birth, and who do you want to be informed, relatives or the government of Ukraine? So they only documented the fact that you were imprisoned, but no further exposure to international organizations. No, none. Like I learned later, when I was back to Ukraine, I was told that Red Cross monitors our stay as prisoners of war, but no international observers have access to the place I was kept in. So how could they possibly claim what were the conditions of our treatment there if there is no access to Alenivka or to the hospital where I stayed as the prisoner of war? One of the important reasons why I care so much for my friends is only because nobody knows what's happening to them. Only the enemies would know. Even if they are exposed to torture as we speak, Red Cross, Amnesty International, nobody has access there right now. Thus, they cannot claim whether the conditions of stay there are normal or subhuman. As is that. Colleagues, next question. Good afternoon, can you hear me? Yes, loud and clear. Artem Bonder, Wall Street Journal. Guys, thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice for the sake of Ukraine. Unfortunately, what happened in Azovstal is no longer the priority, and that's why some of the journalists ask you about Dugin's daughter. But let me ask you two questions. Firstly, while you were fighting in the streets of Mariupol, have you seen with your own eyes that the Russian troops were terrorizing the civilians, shelling them, shooting at the cars, robbing the apartments. And my second question would be, while being imprisoned, either in prison or in prison hospital, how many brothers in arms disappeared? They will take them out of the cell and then either would not be brought back and disappear or would be brought back with some uh, signs of torture. Yeah. Have I seen with my own eyes that the enemy kept violating humanitarian laws, and the fact that the enemy harmed not only the prisoners but civilians in the streets of Mariupol? Yeah, I've seen the enemy destroying not families, not standalone houses, but the whole neighborhoods. I've seen shellings when the whole neighborhood would be destroyed in one barrage, and I have pictures and recordings of what was happening in Mariupol. You can see burned out buildings, and you should recognize that it still had some residents still in there. You mentioned shootings at cars. Well, of course, the Russians themselves share the evidence of robbing the apartments of local residents. They take videos using cell phones stolen from the local residents, and I have recordings that prove that dozens of thousands of civilians were killed in Mariupol. Even a single murdered person is a tragedy, but in Mariupol, the whole families, the whole neighborhoods were murdered. So, of course, it's a clear lie that whatever residents of Mariupol that are left there would make a statement that they are so glad to be liberated by the Russians. Well, every single person who is still stays in the territories that are temporarily occupied, they are aware of their relatives who were killed or disappeared. So if you look at the recordings and the pictures of the whole buildings, well, not even buildings, the whole neighborhoods, blocks of flats destroyed. So now the enemy claims that they are all lost in action. Also, please do not forget about those crematoria that they brought to Mariupol. So basically, if the Russians claim that some Mariupol residents disappeared, that is definitely that they were killed, murdered, and then destroyed in the crematoria. Well, yes, I was an eyewitness of their tanks shooting at the residential buildings, and that was happening all the time, shooting at the uh, buildings, residential buildings with civilians living there. I've seen a family trying to cross the street, and the Russians used heavy machine gun, they wounded a child into the leg, and we provided first aid to that child. As to your second question, yes, there were brothers in arms that were taken from our cell and they would not be brought back. Well, another case, in 2 days' time, one of our soldiers was brought back, but his legs were broken, his ribs were broken, he couldn't possibly swallow uh, food, and he told us that they were beating on him because he refused to sign any mock statements, but I'm not aware of what happened to him afterwards. Dmitry, what would you say about this? As to Mariupol, I've seen hundreds of corpses lying on the streets of Mariupol, and they were civilians. As to the second question, well, back in Novazovsk, I'm aware of one guy who was taken out and then shot dead. Well, in Mariupol, those paratroopers who were brought back couldn't recognize the city. Yes, I couldn't recognize it when I flew in there on helicopter. It was almost like a horror house. Shell-shocked children. It was a sore sight to my eyes, especially everything to do with children. Would you like to add something? Yes, in respect of Mariupol, what my brother-in-law said, that he couldn't recognize the city, and that's true. Just one thing is to see it on pictures, but try to imagine it happening to your hometown, and just imagine that all of the windows are shattered and glass is everywhere, on the streets, under your feet. All the wires are on the ground because all the lampposts are down. There are chunks of houses taken out, while other buildings were turned into rubble, and you never know whether there's still civilians in the basement, because the building now lies as a rubble on top of it. Some of the residents tried to get evacuated from Mariupol to Zaporizhia, and two of my friends succeeded to leave the city on the third attempt, and the residents could already recognize the sound of shelling. They could even recognize the caliber of the round flying in. And we're talking about the civilians with no military training, but the shelling was so dramatic that they learned this the hard way. And now imagine the columns of people on foot trying to flee the city under shelling that would never stop. So I could not blame people who decided to flee towards Rostov, towards Russian territory. How can I blame people who try to survive under constant shelling? The civilians, the non-combatants, in order to survive, could give fake evidence just to survive. As to your second question, at the time I was wounded, and my second serious injury happened in the night before the vacation, and my subordinate was in a safe place, and right after I was wounded I talked to him over the radio, but only recently I learned that his name was found on the list of killed in action. So I'm very much afraid that he was murdered while being a prisoner of war, because at the time when I talked to him, he was in the safe place and there was no shelling because we were ready to get evacuated. As his commander, I can only hope that by accident his name was put on the list of killed in action. But again, after Alenivka, I'm getting myself ready to the worst. Could they create the situation in Alenivka as the way to psychologically pressure the other prisoners of war. Yes, it's not even my guess, it's a fact. All weekly, if not daily, we would be told while staying in the prison that these were Ukrainian troops that hit Alenivka. Well, I knew that that was. So they were telling you that Alenivka was shelled even before it happened. Yes, we were told even before Alenivka happened that when they said to us, "Well, look, Ukraine doesn't need you." That's why they even shelled Alenivka, and it happened before the actual shelling happened. Anastasia Chkalova, Vikna STB. First of all, I would like to thank you for your courage. Thank you for your service. So you've been cut off from information, you were left in vacuum, you were under constant pressure and torture. So what helped you to withstand all this disinformation? What do you believe worked in your favor not to cave in? Thank you for your question. Mitra, let's start with you. Yeah, thank you. Well, we believed in our country, we believed in our armed forces. Being Ukrainians, we always believe in Ukraine. Denis, what about you? What helped you withstand all that? Knowing Russia, that they always lie, I just never trusted them. I only trust the armed forces of Ukraine, and that we will keep fighting. We'll keep defending our cities. Russians would never be able to capture our cities. So it was the faith in our country and brothers-in-laws. What about you, Vladislav? I couldn't allow myself to trust the enemy because while we had internet over Starlink at Azovstal steelworks, I was reading what they were writing about us, and I haven't seen a single truthful news. So being imprisoned, being cut off from information, with no ability to double check what they tell us, well, of course, I would treat everything that they would tell me as a blatant lie, and it's then proved to be the case. After I was released, that's what I learned. They were lying to me. As to what helped me, well, I stay calm because I know I did what I could, and I will keep doing what I can uh, to keep fighting for our country. Do what you can. Try to find where you can be helpful. Commit yourselves, and then you'll sleep tight, and your consciousness would be calm, and you would know that you're contributing to one common goal. And our goal is to become victorious. They planned to defeat us in 2 weeks' time, and it's almost 6 months now. Please help to speed up our victory. People often enough ask me how long the war would last. Well, if we keep fighting, the victory will come as soon as possible. Kiev Post, your last question. We can see you. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Welcome, glory to Ukraine. Thank you for being indomitable. I'm Roman Revitchuk. I'm under international protection now. I would like to ask you, is it true what we heard that where you stayed you had food supplies for more than 6 months? because while you were fighting the Russians, you can seize their ammunition and weapons, meaning that you can stay there for 6 more months. Why I'm asking you this? Uh, there is information that you were uh, lied to and you were made prisoners of war in exchange of grain supplies. Well, quite an exotic question indeed. If my brothers-in-law would agree, let me try and handle this question. Well, I've been until the last night at Azov steel steelworks. Well, weapons and ammunition is what we lacked the most. Like people ask us, probably water or food. No, 120 millimeter mines. That's what we missed. Weapons and ammunition. I'll get back to your other question, just for you to understand how bad it was, and so that other military who would hear me will recognize this. In the last couple of months, the mortar unit had 5 mines left of different caliber. Well, any military person will recognize 5 mines. You might not even hit one target with 5 of them. So it was not about incurring losses on the enemy, it's just scaring them slightly. Well, as to food and water, there was lots of water in Azovstal, that's true. But there was lots of water in one place and virtually half a liter a day per person in another place. But in order to bring it from the place where you have water, you would have to cross 1 kilometer of under direct shooting and shelling. And we're talking about ruins. There were no buildings to go through. You have to crawl on top of the ruins. I can only remember a couple of hours when Azovstal was not shelled at. That's when the civilians were successfully taken out. All the other time it was under constant shelling. I've seen soldiers, defenders of Azovstal, who were hit when they were trying to walk out. All the underground communications were completely ruined. 24/7, heavy artillery shelling, airstrikes all the time with heavy bombs. Lots of people died being covered by rubble underground, or when they try to move from one place to another. Yeah, there might be a stockpile of food someplace, but even if it was somewhere, but in order to bring it to where it was needed, well, it was virtually impossible. Let me illustrate it with one example. A medical bunker where some still alive medics from Mariupol hospital were left there. So the code name of this medical bunker was Железяка, the iron thing. So it was the bunker where we kept heavily wounded soldiers, and there the food ratio was 1 porridge a day with 1 piece of lard. That's how much they could eat. But this glass would probably even be more than the size of porridge that they will get a day, and that's for heavily wounded persons. And you need to bring it daily from another bunker, and the distance was 730 or 600 or 730 meters, but still more than half a kilometer. So soldiers from another bunker would have to bring this food there, and sometimes they might fail. I heard at least one soldier killed in an attempt to bring food, and 4 others wounded, at least 4 others. So food stockpiles for 6 months could be, but no ability to get access to it. I personally hasn't seen lots of food there. Like a glass of porridge a day, and where I stayed it was one plate a day. Thank you. Thank you, esteemed friends. I would like to thank you for the interest to the defenders of Azovstal. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service, for withstanding this all with courage and dignity. I wish you fast recovery. So, dear friends, in conclusion, I would like to uh, repeat, all our soldiers are ready to be eyewitnesses at any international war crimes trial that would happen after our victory. But what might or might not happen in Mariupol in the upcoming days, it has nothing to do to justice, it has nothing to do to proper court trials, because what we would observe are proper military tribunal of Russia. And at that tribunal, every Azov regiment soldier who survived the hell would provide evidence of tortures, of inhumane treatments. Each and every one of them who survived have such stories, and of course they're ready to be eyewitnesses.